Good evening, everyone. Greetings to you all. We are back after a summer break, and this is our 40th video, and a new commentator joins me this evening, my dear friend and the board member of our society, Gültekin Çilekar. Welcome, my dear friend.
Greetings, dear Tülin. It is so nice joining you in this series. Yes, I have been watching all videos, but becoming a commentator is something else. I hope together we will do a good work.
Our dear friends who follow us in this series from the first video on, know very well that we started this series to read and comment on the divine order and the universe, a very special book for our society and for the humankind. We try to make the concepts and terms of this book more easily understood, but our comments and words are not written in stone, of course. As we change and get developed, our understanding of these concepts and terms change, as well. We make new discoveries as we read this book, and we try to do best to include all those changing perspectives and discoveries into our comment. Anything you want to say?
Yes, you are right. Especially, as we talk about this transcendent knowledge and information, we try to convey some meanings from our level of understanding. Of course, we don't say what comes to our mind right away. We do a preparatory work and study beforehand. Yet, as you said, in time, what we understood changes and we add new understanding to our previous thinking. And in this way, as the capacity of our understanding widens, we share these with our dear friends in our lectures and this series. Tomorrow we may understand these in a different way. We may add things or take out things from our understanding. Because of this, we must always take these concepts and terms with a flexible mind, without drawing solid frames as much as possible, and of course, without making fat-fetched or absurd interpretation. We need to be flexible, because we have a profound knowledge in our hands, and we need to utilize our intuition to understand it as much as possible, and on the other hand, maybe even before this, we must digest some spiritual knowledge. Yes, together we will try spending efforts in that direction, as human beings, and also as readers of this book.
Before I continue reading from the page we had stopped in our last video, I'd like to suggest our dear friends to watching our previous videos back to back, so can they have a better idea about the scope of the topics we had covered so far. It is certainly better to learn about those previous parts of the divine order and the universe, because the topics and concepts we will read are closely related and built upon these. Alright, let's start reading. After explaining these divisions regarding function, let us explain the way ordinary comprehension occurs in the light of this knowledge. When a man looks at an external object, for example, at a pencil, vibrations belonging to that pencil go to the optic center by passing through certain stations starting from the points around the optic system. And when it reflects from there to the consciousness center, the initial material comprehension occurs. This comprehension is the world comprehension completely belonging to the superficial time activity to which the brain is subject. This influence goes to the higher consciousness from the consciousness via the channel of unconscious, and there, comprehension belonging to the being occurs, which is outside of the world reality and cannot be understood by mankind. The being knows this pencil within an encompassing comprehension. Let us repeat that the material comprehension occurring in the consciousness and the subtle comprehension occurring in the being are not the same. The qualities of these comprehensions, depending on the matter milieux they are made of, become dense and subtle according to the relatively dense consciousness and comparatively very fluidic higher consciousness. Comprehension connected to consciousness manifests in a crude manner in accordance with the material structure of the consciousness center, unlike in a compassing and complex manner as it is in the being. The above example we give about the comprehension of the pencil is a simple schematic. The way we mention may be much more complicated than this. Other related centers and stations can also be involved with this journey of influence. Likewise, some influences from the unconscious can be involved. These adopt innumerable states in accordance with innumerable necessities.
Yes, here we read an example of a pencil. just to explain the mechanism of ordinary comprehension. But we must know that, by ordinary comprehension, what is meant is its function of perception. Because comprehension has many more deep meanings, it is a profound concept. Yes, the book explains this mechanism of perception to us by a simple, everyday object, and the book states how the vibrations of a pencil go to the optic center, to our sense organs for seeing, and these vibrations go through many centers, starting with the peripheral system of our eyes, and when reflected to the consciousness center, then we perceive that pencil. However, even in this level of ordinary comprehension, this process is not just like our eyes taking a photograph of a pencil and send this photo to our mind and the process stops there. No, this perception includes more: the form, the color, the position, the purpose of that pencil, why it is there, etc. All of these impressions of its relation to other objects in its vicinity necessarily brings out a process of change in our brain. I mean, even the book explains this process. At the level of ordinary comprehension or perception, this process still wakes up in us a simple level of awareness and decisions. Like, I pick up that pencil, I will use it for this and that. And when we expand this simple process to the all events and impressions within our daily life, its scope widens. And we read in this passage that this is just the material comprehension, material perception, as the other beings and objects send vibrations to us, and these vibrations go through an evaluation process within the capacity of the brain's consciousness cells, and in accordance with our worldly perceptions, and these impressions bring out some comprehension in us. However, the subtle comprehension occurring in our being is much more encompassing, and a completely different process. Of course, this can be understood by intuitively. Still, I can give an example that I frequently use in my lectures, and this example can be a nice explanation about the transformation of material comprehension into subtler comprehension. You know, Gurdjieff names the impressions as food. When we eat something, it gets first digested in our mouth by the saliva secreted from salivary glands. Then, we swallow this mushy paste to send it down to our stomach. Stomach acids break down this mushy paste more and more, and the paste becomes almost a liquid. Then, this watery food passes to our small intestines, and the cells lining the intestines break it down again, and absorb the nutrients from this liquid food, so can they go into the bloodstream. And then, these molecules go into other cells in other organs, and become transformed into energy. As you can see, even within our crude matter body, this sublimation process occurs every day. Solid food, when end up in the cells, is energy, and there is no similarity between its initial form and energy form. We can apply this example to the comprehension at the material and subtle levels. When the crude matter impressions, influences, energies we perceive and hear pass to the dimension of the being after passing through the unconscious, because these go through a sublimation process, they are transformed into something else we cannot describe by words. The same process is valid for the essence knowledge as well. The world knowledge we gain as we live in events goes through a process of sublimation and is restored in our unconscious. And after death, upon its comparison with the knowledge of our previous lifetime stored in the subconscious, this world knowledge is transformed into essence knowledge, so its form changes. Well, we cannot even say form, it is energy now, and we don't have more words to describe subtler forms. I said, the perception of the pencil or the world is not like a photograph taken and restored in the unconscious. I think our perception is like a video recording, and its resolution and the details this recording contains vary according to the scope of our consciousness center and our level of comprehension, because all those recorded are interrelated, interconnected. We already read in this book that comprehension is the ferment of the being in the spiritual evolution and development, and also, comprehension is the force or power within the matter constitution. Therefore, because as above so below, here, in the crude matter cosmos of us, the human comprehension is to make connections between objects and events, to understand their interrelation, to grasp their further cause and effect chains, and the scope of comprehension ever widens like this. Here and now I simply try to make connections between certain things in my life, yet, as my comprehension widens, I may begin to understand the function of the events I live in the life of others. Next, I may begin to understand my own function within my community. Next, I may begin to have an idea about an influence's value of utilization in the universal level. However, in this current level of comprehension, I am unaware of these, because my brain cells do not have that capacity. And, if our friends remember what we read and discuss so far in this series, this is also said about the development of being as well. A being, through the body it built, grasp first the relations between causes and effects, then the relations between the beings in varying levels. And as the being's comprehension widens in this way, it also begins to establish such relations by itself. Starting from the most primitive level of comprehension, the beings start to make combinations. Hence, we also do this. We talk about creativity, this ability of an artist that makes combinations between objects and ideas and begins to utilize these to express them in different ways. Just like an artist, we also bring out a painting or sculpture or a composition within our life, and this painting means something to us, yet it means completely something else to our being.
For us, human beings, this material comprehension, or perception that depends on the brain is very important. Because, starting from our conception to our last breath, all of our impressions and learnings are to be stored in the unconscious by the neurological network of our brain and the nervous system. Our brain works incredibly fast as it receives images through optic nerves, sound waves through our ears, somatic sensations and feelings through the nerves of skin. Our brain compares such new stimuli or impressions with the restored knowledge in the unconscious within nanoseconds. And as the conclusion of this comparison, our brain, and consequently, we make a meaning out of this new information. In that sense, health of the brain is very important. Nevertheless, in case of brain damage due to an accident, illness, or operation, there are cases where the other regions of the patient's brain take over the functions of the now defunct regions. This organ works hard to sustain this organic system we call our body. And if you remember from our previous videos or read this book, our being builds our body as a vehicle to itself in the crude levels of matter universe. So, our being, in a much subtler level than our body, process these impressions and knowledge for its purposes. After all, our being is in service to our spirit. Let's say, as you walk on a street, you witness an event, a man is beating a child. Your brain received the images and all other sensations of this event and conveyed them throughout the nervous system as electrical signals. Next is the phase to assign a feeling or emotion to this event, and this requires comparing the previous knowledge in the unconscious with this new information. And as a result of this comparison, different choices emerge. You may decide to intervene. You may feel compassion for the child if you were beaten in a similar way in your childhood, etc., etc. Within nanoseconds, your brain will process all of these and you will make a choice. Yes, at best, your choice or decision is to be more or less comprehending, but generally it will be semi-comprehending, and mostly, automatic, more correctly, reactive. After all, this is our gradual pace in our developmental journey, but with each connection we make and meaning we assign to, we widen the capacity, or elevate the level of our reality. As you can see, other than the material comprehension, there is a different system that makes all those evaluation, comparison, assessments and add these into essence being, and this kind of great accounting, or in other words, transformation of the knowledge in the unconscious to the essence knowledge occurs after death of the body. As we previously read in the divine order and the universe, all this knowledge accumulated in the unconscious will pass to the subconscious at the event of death. And the being will enter a state of isolation, closed to the external influences, and we call this state or field of isolation as spatium. Yes, in that state, the being will compare the knowledge gained in that last lifetime with the knowledge of the past lifetimes that kept in the subconscious. And this comparison is made through the level of conscience the being reached to. Yet that level of conscience is different than the appearance of the conscience we can display in this world. Here, our conscience is intertwined with the personality traits of the current body, with the egoistical suppression, etc. However, after death, all those veils, curtains or resistance mechanisms of the body vanish and the conscience of the being emerges fully. And this brings us to the topic of the need for widening our capacity for conscience and comprehension. As we do this more and more, we become more aware of the connections between the cause and effect chains in the events of our personal and communal and global and universal life. And this process is again, as you mentioned, a gradual sublimation or digestion of all the impressions and knowledge we gain and accumulate in our life. And because each new impression adds new values and consequently disrupt the equilibrium or status quo of the organism, and sometimes new impressions may put the system into shock. All of these impressions, be it food or perceptions we get from daily life, need to be processed.
As I listen your words about the difference between crude and subtler impressions, an image appeared in my mind's eye. Imagine that with a projector, you project a photograph to a wall. All the shadows and lines appear on the wall with clear and obvious borders. However, if we project this image to a tulle curtain, all those clear borders and lines becomes less clear, less obvious. In this sense, the impressions coming to our consciousness, even though these are appearances, shadows, or projections, are still denser when compared with the much subtler imprints of those impressions in our superconsciousness. Of course, all those processes are about the subtlety. Interestingly, dear Tülin, now we are talking about living in the midst of events, but if we could always be aware of this working of such immensely interconnected system, as we are going through a given event, I think, we wouldn't react to the situations but we could respond to it. I mean, we could see things from a very different perspective. And we are constantly receiving impressions because we are always in the process of widening our comprehension. Yes, these are stored in the unconscious, but superconsciousness also is sending influences to us, because they are functions of a whole, not separate levels of consciousness.
And the most important influences are the ones coming from our own being, and also from the beings in duty. We are under an immense bombardment of influences.
And these influences push or orient us into certain events, certain situations in accordance with the aims of our being. It is all about widening our capacity of comprehension. Here, this world is an educational environment, and learning and knowing about these is a magnificent process. You know, sometimes people ask us, what's good in knowing these? Of course, knowledge we read and hear and learn is only a guide for us. However, if we can remember this knowledge in the heat of the moment of an event, then this knowledge turns into an educational tool. This is why, in our lectures, we emphasize the need of actively remembering this knowledge within our daily life, because this increases our capacity for flexibility and adaptation. The more flexible we are, the more the gains we acquire as we go through events in life.
What you said about the impressions, that they are food for our being, is so important. In that sense, the quality of the food we take in has utmost importance. Are these nutritious, that is, sublimating and elevating you? Or decreasing your frequency, keeping you in the automatism and unaware? Also, the amount of the food is important. Just like overeating makes us sleepy and bloaty, if we neglect digesting the impressions we have properly, those undigested impressions may emerge as attention deficiency, concentration problems, etc. So, quality and quantity of the impressions are important. From the images in the social media posts that you scroll in your mobile phone or computer screen, TV dramas you watch every week or in a binge, the news you hear and watch and read, all other impressions you receive from the people you live with, work with, commute with, etc., etc. And as we read about the imagery and imagination in the further pages of the divine order and the universe, our dear friends will understand the importance of this more and more. Because all those impressions, images and influences make up the content of our unconscious. And we can choose with which impressions we need to feed ourselves, only when we begin to widen our comprehension. Recently, I attended an online World Congress and one of the presentations was titled as, "Do we really have freedom of choice?" The presenter asked many questions like, are we really free in the act of choosing? Or all those experiences and activities we go through in life is for acquiring the freedom of choice? Is today's human really free under the constant bombardment of all those impressions? Or do we need to be awake, to comprehend to gain the freedom of choice? And the presenter concluded by saying that a human being needs to be more integrated, in the sense of energy. He or she is fragmented and lost within so-called choices introduced by the world, and must find its true needs, hence, the proper impressions. Well, just like Gurdjieff says, man is a machine, man is in deep sleep. And in order to become truly human, man needs to work on himself. And in the divine order and the universe, we read about automatisms. And we try to do our best to break those automatisms, for example, coming together in this online study series. Right now, more than 80 persons are watching us online. You could be watching your favorite TV drama or social media reels, but you are here, with us, and right now, we are talking about our brain, the impressions we take in as food, etc., which are not sensational topics. Yet, this indicates that our beings are in search for more nutritious food, or quality impressions. And by taking in more of those quality impressions, as we are fed with their rich nutrients, we are more able to widen our comprehension and consequently, we are more able to break the chains of automatisms. And when a group of human beings, just like we are, discuss and converse together on such topics, and try to make these clearer by comments and questions, then we have more power to wake up from our deep slumber, we have more power to find meanings. And, I want to thank you for your attendance. Right now, we are feeding ourselves with the impressions we take in from the divine order and the universe. This is precious for all of us.
Nowadays, eating healthy is so popular, of course. This is a good thing for the health of our physical body. But foods are not the only source for nutrients for us. Similarly, we need to be more attentive, careful and informed about the impressions feeding our subtler body, subtler level of our perception. At some point, we may even become able to choose the events we will go through, but of course, up to a certain degree, because we are subject to the law of sympathization, and we cannot organize and control each and every detail of our life. Still, it is possible for us to choose the fields of interest, or fields of activity, that we can take more quality impressions from. We have this freedom of choice. And here, with you, we chose this activity for this evening.
And this kind of feeding our mental body is very important, because what we take in as impressions during the day is to be evaluated and digested in a process, what we know as sleep. Next passage is about sleep. Let's continue reading. Now, we will explain sleep. For comprehension to occur, the consciousness center should be free and high in frequency up to a degree so it can invoke the impressions existing in itself. In the state of mankind we call awake, consciousness is always in connection with the higher consciousness. Similarly, it is in an open state to the centers. That is, it is in connection with centers. So, it receives the influences coming from the surroundings. In summary, in the awakened state, consciousness is in communication on the one hand with the being and on the other hand with its surroundings, that is, with world life. By this means, it receives influences both from above, from the superconsciousness, and from below, from the world. And by this, it prevails over the whole nervous system and through it, over the organism. That is, it governs the body in accordance with the necessities coming from the superconsciousness. We previously stated that actually the consciousness center directly governs the body. The being utilizes the body by using this center. During sleep, some centers' connections to the outer realm cease. These centers, besides the consciousness, connect to the unconscious. These centers are now related to the superconsciousness, not to the world. And we call this introversion of the centers. And such introversion of the centers which are not sensitive to the outer realm at that time brings about the state we call the sleep state. Therefore, these centers are passive and motionless towards the outer realm, but in contrast, very active and mobile towards the superconsciousness. At that moment, because the consciousness and related centers are free of their connection to the outer realm, in order to transfer the results of their daily acquisitions to the unconscious, they render their first accounting regarding the conscience by the knowledge of comparison in the unconscious with ease. These results will stay there, in the unconscious. Since they are not compared yet with essence knowledge by the essence being, there are discrepancies between these and essence knowledge. Because of this knowledge cannot be included with the essence knowledge synthesis in the subconscious. It remains in the unconscious, at the field of the being which is near to the consciousness. Its accumulation here, as previously said, continues until the moment of death. Therefore, centers appearing immobile and passive towards the surroundings during sleep achieve important deeds within. However, their activities are not extrovert but introvert. And all of their preoccupation consists only in the procedure of passing on daily events to the unconscious. For the soundness of this procedure, they must cease their connections to the surroundings and withdraw into a rest in relation to daily life, that is, the state we call sleep must occur.
The importance of sleep period for human health has always been emphasized. Yet recently, I hear from mainstream health experts that not having enough hours of sleep each day may increase the risk for the Alzheimer's disease. And now, in this passage, we read that when we are awake, our consciousness receives influences both from the superconsciousness and from the world, but as we sleep, some centers' connections to the outer realm stop. I think this is like a daily brain cleaning. The impressions we take in during a given day need to be restored in the unconscious, and the related centers should be emptied for the impressions of the next day. As the neurologists say, there are some processes and chemicals that build plaques in the areas of the brain concerned with memory and other cognitive functions. These plaques are abnormally configured proteins that play a central role in Alzheimer's disease. As you know, our spiritual processes, our physical processes have their own chemical counterparts. Just like the chakras align with the hormonal centers of our body, I think, when people cannot sleep properly, they cannot send those daily impressions to the unconscious, and then a kind of negative accumulation occurs in the body. People that are interested in electronics may know very well that there are diodes which allow electric current to go only in one direction. Similar to these diodes, or like a highway with two lanes but one lane is closed to traffic, the contact of external stimuli and of impressions with our being stopped during sleep. There is now only a one-way current, from the centers to the unconscious. Of course, soon, as we read about the mechanism of dreams, we will see a different process.
Yes, as the researchers say, especially the sleep period between midnight to 4 a.m. is important. This must be the period for the closing of brain centers to external stimuli. which is necessary for the conveying the knowledge accumulated in the centers during the day to the unconscious through a filtering process. Considering the fact that we sleep 7 or 8 hours every day, a significant amount of lifetime is dedicated to sleeping, and we see that this is necessary. Our being needs proper sleep periods, otherwise, the current or flow of influences between our body and our being becomes disrupted. Consequently, the connection between the center of consciousness and the other related centers becomes disrupted. Our brain gets developed by making new neuron connections that are called brain pathways or circuitry. However, if our brain constantly gets the same impressions and makes the same connections over and over, our brain prunes the rest of the pathways that are not used. These findings of the researchers keep on changing our well-established notions and ideas about the working of our brains. And these new findings correspond to the knowledge we read in the divine order and the universe. And what we call as new discoveries are actually rediscoveries, because these are explained in the oral and written traditions of the ancient times. Yes, we understand very well that the health of our nervous system has utmost importance. Because our brain and nervous system in our body are the most important instrument of our being. Right now, all of us are using a modem to receive the transmitted bytes of this streaming video, don't we? We need a good processor in our computers to send bytes properly so you can watch it in your screens when those digits are transformed into audio and video. The better the capacity of our gadget's processor, the better the result. Similarly, a healthy brain means good connection between the body and the being. We must take care this material comprehension instrument we call brain, so it can function properly in collecting and conveying the impression of daily life to the unconscious, hence, to the being. For many years, the concept of matter and material things in general was not favored, even belittled in the spiritual circles, yet, when the divine order and the universe is disclosed in 2013, first sentence of this book was, "Matter is a component constituting the ground for all influences and responding to these influences in varying proportions." And as this book continues to explain how everything, even the concepts we deem most spiritual and subtle, is of matter, this was jarring or shocking for most of the readers. Nevertheless, as new discoveries made in the many fields of science, we find more correlations between these and this spiritual knowledge, which says that there are infinitely subtler levels of matter.
And there is an emphasis in this passage, related centers of consciousness, as they transferring the results of their daily acquisitions to the unconscious. They render their first accounting regarding the conscience by the knowledge of comparison in the unconscious with ease. So, we see here that the mechanism of conscience works even as we sleep. Most people think conscience is just good or bad choices in the face of some events of their daily life, or they think that when they do a good deed, they are conscientious. It is not that simple. We read in the divine order and the universe that conscience mechanism is the mechanism for development of the being, its scope is universe-wide, and it works as a filter even as we sleep. Again, we must not think this filtering process in simple terms, like all impressions of a given day are funneled into a sieve, etc. This is actually a process of assessment, evaluation. There are previously restored impressions in our unconscious, and the new impressions of the day are to be compared with the restored impressions. And in this comparison, an initial filtering is done by the mechanism of conscience, through filters like intuition, conscience, the sense of duty, the main purposes of the life plan, etc. It may have such a function because when a human being is sleeping, he or she is open to the higher or superconsciousness, but closed to the crude impressions. So, when we talk about conscience, we must think of the influences and impressions coming from his or her own being. And if we remember the definition of conscience in this book, our level of conscience indicates our tendency for acting in the direction of earthly cravings or sensuality side, or in the direction of duty side. But of course, the duty here does not mean the worldly tasks, missions, and responsibilities, but it is a filtering which is about the way, the direction we think and act in as we deal with our worldly tasks, missions, and responsibilities. And I think the imprints or traces or summary of such impressions are filtered as we sleep and pass to the unconscious. Well, we cannot even say impression to these.
Yes, to make a distinction, I started to say deep impressions when I talk about the impressions that pass to the unconscious. Still, can we understand these? Not much, but we try hard to intuit. One of the facts I'd like to underline is that in the midst of the daily hustle and bustle of life, to receiving intuitions or influences from our own being is not so easy. As the external impressions increase in number and intensity, we incline to act in automatism. And the sleep period is one of the most significant retreat periods when we can be without the stimuli of the external impressions and without the familiarity of automatisms. Besides ensuring the health of the brain and the nervous system, sleep is important in enabling this filtering and comparison processes between the body's consciousness centers and the higher consciousness of the being, and also strengthening the main connection between the being and the brain. In that sense, this saying is so apt. Sleep on it. Before making a decision or instead of making a decision within a state or reality a person is currently in, this is the advice or suggestion given. Sleep on it. It sounds like whoever suggests this know that we need sleep so we can be able to evaluate the impressions of that event entailing a decision from us at our level of being, at the level of our being's influences and intuition. And because in the nighttime sleep, we are without usual and habitual defense mechanisms, resistances, egoistical justifications. However, during a day, when we are supposedly awake, we are in daytime sleep when all of these are active and affecting us. Our usual and habitual defense mechanisms, resistances, egoistical justifications lull us to day sleep so easily. Yet, during true sleep, the thick layers of the curtains of the defense mechanisms, of the mental temptations are up. In that sense, we are awake to our being during sleeping.
I have read in a book that wise people or some inventors or geniuses sleep less than ordinary people. They only spend 4 or 5 hours in sleep, but I think the reason for this is such people can close their centers of consciousness to the unnecessary external impressions and are more oriented to within, hence to their own being. This is why we suggest meditative practices. Of course, like it should be everything else, such closing to outside, opening to inside process should be in balance as well. Because external world, life, other people and objects, events are necessary for us to take impressions from them. Still, turning inward, going within is also necessary to strengthen our spiritual muscles so that we are not swept by the events in life so easily.
Yes, let's continue reading. Explaining the mechanism of dreams becomes easy in that state. Dreams occur in 2 ways, that is, by the intervention of 2 influence sources. One of these is the influences coming from below, from surroundings. The other is the influences coming from the superconsciousness. First of all, let us study the influences coming from the surroundings. When a sleeping person's foot is touched by a feather slightly, but not too strongly to disturb his sleep, vibrations coming out of here will not wake the center pertaining to the foot but will disturb it because it is busy with its own deeds at that time. It does not want to be busy with this influence coming from surroundings. Because of this, as if shrugging off this influence coming from the foot, it conveys this to the subconscious via the channel of unconscious which it is connected to at that time. In effect, for this center which is motionless towards surroundings to convey an influence coming from there in this way is a motion. However, it can make a small motion to do this in the face of this influence coming from outside, which is not too strong to wake it. Nevertheless, if the influence becomes a little intense, these motions increase, and the increase of motion frequencies of the center towards the surroundings obliges it to turn from within to outward, that is, to wake up. Now, let us continue assuming that it is not awoken. When the influence coming from the foot enters the subconscious, it grabs the suitable ones among the endless impressions existing there and activates them. By this means, an application of imagination occurs in the subconscious automatically, without control. Reflection of every motion occurring in the brain to the consciousness center either directly or via other channels is a rule. However, these reflected influences are sometimes too weak to invoke impressions in the consciousness. In that case, the consciousness center does its duty without comprehending. Here, the images occurring in the subconscious reflect to the consciousness via the channel of unconscious. If these reflected impressions are strong enough to activate consciousness, frequency of the consciousness sufficiently increases to receive these images belonging to the surroundings and comprehends the images and wakes up at the same time. And at that moment, the dream is on. If the vibrations coming from the subconscious do not evoke enough motions in the molecules of the center constituting consciousness field, the consciousness center continues with its preoccupation and is not busy with these images, and no dream will come. Let us say that the images reflected to the consciousness from the subconscious are comprehended by the consciousness in ways suitable to its material structure, that is, to its world reality as much as possible. Therefore, the dream is not something seen. It is a kind of imagination. Because of the occurrence of an event, that is, all exchanges between consciousness and superconsciousness starting from the awakening in the foot happen in milliseconds, dream is momentary. Every man tickled by a feather does not necessarily have a dream. For example, the center connected to the foot is so preoccupied with its deeds that influences coming from the foot do not activate it. Similarly, vibrations coming from the subconscious may not be intense enough to activate the consciousness. Then, no dream comes.
So, it may sound complicated, but actually it is simple. As previously stated in the book, as we sleep, our consciousness is turned toward our unconscious and the superconsciousness, and is closed to the world, to the external stimuli. And the book gives a simple example of external influence. If we touch the foot of a person with a feather, his body should react, but when that person is asleep and related centers of his consciousness are closed to external influences, his body does not react enough to wake him up, but still, the vibrations of the stimulus go to the related center. If the stimulus of the touching feather is intense, then the related center will certainly alert other centers, and they will turn outward, and the person wakes up. However, because the consciousness is now turned toward the unconscious and the superconsciousness, this center sends this stimulus to the subconscious via the unconscious, because it cannot deal with it at that time, and this begins an application of imagining in the subconscious. This reminds me the pranks the students play at each other in the dormitories I stayed. By filling up a glass with water and emptying it to another glass, they try to make their sleeping friend wet the bed. The victim of the prank generally cannot wake up in time and soils his pajamas and his bed. What happens when the person does not wake up? But such stimuli are sent to the unconscious, and this activates an imagining in the subconscious. Well, if the term is apt, our subconscious is like an image bank. Innumerable variants of images are stored there from our myriad impressions of our past lifetimes. And the stimulus, when sent to the subconscious, finds a suitable but random match in this image bank. Now imagine this bank is full of hundreds of billiard balls in many colors. When the stimulus comes and strikes one of these balls, a few of the balls start to fall down into a composition. You may imagine each ball as an image if you like. If these images, when come together, can bring out a strong vibration, then our center of consciousness sort these images in a certain way to make up a fiction out of this sorting, and we call this dreaming. Of course, right now we are talking about dreams activated by external influences. And these random dreams are called the unconscious dreams. In general, Such dreams seem that they don't have a logical meaning or a message for us. But of course, such dreams are meaningful in the sense that they are the result of energy and influence exchange between the external and internal processes, in the sense that they become the means of transforming of some energies. Well, back to the billiard balls. If those images mobilized with the stimulus sent to the subconscious cannot bring out a certain number of vibrations, then no fiction is made by the center of consciousness out of these images. And, as we read here, then no dream comes.
What strikes my attention in this passage is, the dream is not something seen. It is a kind of imagination. I think this is very important. A dream is the activation of some of our images in our mental and emotional imagery bank, that is, our subconscious. A dream is not something seen because the brain does not see anything. The sense of sight is not active during a dream. There are even some findings of neurologists indicating that REM sleep, or rapid movements of our eyes during dreaming, are not related to seeing but swift changing of scenes, or zapping the scenes while dreaming. There are also researches saying the eye movements are not actually scanning your dream, they're reorienting your visual thoughts. Yes, as you nicely explained with your example of image bank of the subconscious, so, random or related images in the subconscious get activated by external influences, and if their signal strength is enough, the center of consciousness sorts them to make a fiction out of them. Then, an unconscious dream occurs. If the signal strength is weak, then no dream happens. Here, we read another, additional function of the subconscious. We previously learnt that the subconscious is a closed field in this new model of consciousness the divine order and the universe introduced. It is closed to our daily consciousness, and it contains the impressions and knowledge we gained in our past lifetimes, and this information is already filtered through some initial conscience mechanism before it is stored in our subconscious. Now, we read here that our subconscious, when the vibrations of an external influence while we are sleeping is sent via our unconscious, this triggers an application of imagining in our subconscious, and some random selection of imagery matching to the vibrations of this stimulus are sent to the unconscious. I imagine this process like this. My being has a Google account, and this account is linked to a cloud. This cloud contains, let's say 500 lifetimes I had so far. As I sleep, if my foot is touched by a feather, I shrug a little and my center related with my foot sends the vibrations of this external stimulus to my unconscious, but this is relayed to the cloud content, and triggers some files and images matching to this vibration. If those matching images have some high number of vibrations, then these can be comprehended by my center of consciousness, and then it can sort them in a certain way to make a fiction out of these. But this does not happen in the same manner for each human being because the images in the cloud is unique to each individual. That's why dreams of each human being are so different than another's.
Well, a friend of mine, when hospitalized with the infection of COVID-19, had to be intubated and ventilated for 2 weeks. And later, when he is recovered, he started writing down the visions, dreams, or whatever we can call these colorful imagery he had during those 2 weeks. He is kidnapped by women in white robes, crucified and poked with needles. His wrists are tied and hanged from the ceiling, etc., etc. Well, actually, as you can guess, nurses in white protection gear and masks gave him shots and medicine, tied him to the bed, etc. But his descriptions are so full of details from different time periods, and with conversations in different languages he normally doesn't know at all that I think these were colored by the imagery from his subconscious, from some past life memories.
Well, maybe we can reply one of the questions our friends sent. Does this transmitting from consciousness to the unconscious also happen when we are under anesthesia and hangover sleeping? Under such conditions, because the external impressions don't enter the system anymore, the human being is again turned within. This is also valid when a person is in coma, then this is a mandatory isolation from the external influences. Yet, I don't think the sleep with hangover or the sleep when a person is under the influence of other consciousness-altered substances would be proper, because even though the centers are turned within, still the body and the organs need to deal with the adverse effects of alcohol or such substances, and also, electronic gadgets we keep close to our beds, so, if the body needs to spend energy for compensation, then some of the related centers cannot be properly turned within, and some hormones, which are necessary for the health of the brain, cannot be secreted properly during sleep.
It may be that those centers cannot be properly closed to the external stimuli. I mean, maybe they stay semi-closed, and the process becoming too complicated.
Then, we are in limbo.
Yes, exactly. Neither properly open to there nor properly closed to here. Then, things may become problematic for the whole system.
There is another question from our dear friends. In the last few years, I don't dream. Previously, I was having dreams about people and events and they were coming true. I was telling people about these dreams. Do you think that the reason is telling people about my dreams? When we read the next passage about the creams coming from above, or the higher conscious, your question will be answered. Still, if we have dreams about the events to happen, it may be that our being gives us prior knowledge about them as a warning. So, we can brace ourselves against the shock of a sudden death, of an earthquake, etc. Sometimes such events may be overwhelming for our system, our organism, and then, having such a dream may give us a preparatory state of mind. Yet, when such dreams are frequent and we are not ready to spend efforts to explore the reasons behind such dreams and their mechanism, our organism's defense mechanism may become active and prevent such dreams reach surface of our consciousness. I mean, we have such dreams, but we don't remember them. And about telling your dreams to other people, well, you must be attentive about what you say to who, because regardless of the content, a dream has a specific meaning and influence for you, and when other people interpret a dream on your behalf, it may be that they unknowingly add their own influences to their words. Instead of telling your dreams, we suggest you to write them down. Because, later when you read your earlier dreams in your own interpretations or notes about their actualization, you may see they are useful tools to understand your own consciousness, how your images and imagery form our thoughts and interpretations, to learn about your unconscious and subconscious. I said, regardless of a dream's content, because even if you dream due to indigestion or because of a quarrel you had with a coworker, the images in your dream give you information about your own psyche, your own inner material. And this is so valuable in our main task in life, knowing ourselves. Alright, there are many questions, but it is better to read the second type of dreams before replying these, and we will read that passage next week. Yes, after reading this passage about how external impressions may evoke images from our subconscious, and after discussing the importance of learning about our own mental and emotional imagery, you will understand the reason this book's emphasis on the power of imagination much better when we will be reading passages on the plan of love, about that semi-subtle realm. Alright, hoping to see you all next week. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you for your attendance. Good evening.